I was 40 feet up on a scissor lift, running conduit through the ceiling of a new distribution warehouse outside Gary, Indiana, when my phone buzzed in my chest pocket. I almost didn't answer. We had a safety rule on that job site: no phones on the lift. But the number was Marcus Elementary, and when your kid's school calls at 10:40 in the morning, you answer regardless of where you are. I climbed down, pulled off my hard hat. It was my son. Not the front office, my son, Tyler, 11 years old, calling from what I could tell was a bathroom because his voice echoed and he was trying to keep it low and he was crying. "Dad," he said. They showed a video in class. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. "What kind of video, bud?" "A news one. About fraud. About a lady who..." He stopped. I could hear him swallowing. "Dad, it was Mom." I stood in the parking lot of that warehouse with diesel exhaust blowing across the asphalt and I said, very carefully, "Are you safe right now?" "Yeah. I'm coming to get you." What Tyler didn't know, what nobody knew except me, my attorney, and a detective named Garza with the Lake County Financial Crimes Unit, was that I had spent the previous 4 months making sure that when that news segment aired, I was already ready. But let me start from the beginning. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm 47 years old, I've done commercial electrical work for 22 years, and I run a small crew out of Merrillville, Indiana. 4 guys, a van, a trailer, honest work. I'm not a complicated man. I pay my taxes, I coach Tyler's soccer team in the fall, I make my own chili from scratch every winter, and I'm particular about it. Her name was Sandra. We met in 2004 at a New Year's Eve party at a mutual friend's house in Hammond. She was 28, working as an office manager for a small civil engineering firm, and she had this laugh that you heard from across the room before you saw her face. We were married by 2006. Tyler came in 2012, later than we'd planned, and he was the kind of kid who made you feel like the timing had been exactly right. For the first 12 years of our marriage, Sandra and I were solid. She was good at her job, moved up to operations director at the engineering firm by 2015. We bought a 4-bedroom house in Crown Point in 2013. We had a routine, a circle of friends, 2 weeks every summer up at a rental on Lake Michigan. The ordinary architecture of a life built together. The engineering firm she worked for was called Kellerman and Associates. Mid-size operation, civil and structural, did a lot of municipal contracts, roads, drainage, public buildings. Sandra handled everything administrative, payroll, vendor payments, contract compliance. She was trusted completely. Had been for a decade. The first thing I noticed, and I mean the very first thing that registered as wrong rather than just slightly off, was in February of last year. She started staying late at work. Not occasionally. Consistently. 2-3 nights a week, home after 8. I made dinner for Tyler and me, left a plate in the microwave, didn't think much of it at first. Tax season, I told myself. End of fiscal year. These things happen. Then in March she came home one evening and she'd had a drink. Maybe 2. I could smell it, not sloppy, just present. She said she and some colleagues had gone out after a late meeting. Fine. Except Sandra almost never drank on weeknights. Hadn't since Tyler was born. I noticed. I noted it. And I moved on. That was my mistake, moving on too quickly from the things I noticed. By April the late nights were still happening. By May there was a new element, a second phone. I didn't discover it dramatically. I saw it by accident. I was in our bedroom looking for my phone charger and I opened her nightstand drawer, the one I never opened because it was her space, her reading glasses, her chapstick, her business, and there was a phone there that wasn't her iPhone. A Motorola. Basic. The kind you'd buy in a blister pack. I closed the drawer. I didn't touch it. I went and found my charger in the kitchen and I sat at the table for a long time thinking. I thought about the late nights. The drinks. The way she'd started turning her main phone face down when she set it on the counter, which she'd never done before. The way certain conversations, when she was on the phone and I walked into a room, seemed to wrap up faster than they should have. I'm not an impulsive man. That's probably my best quality and my worst one simultaneously. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask about the Motorola. What I did instead was start paying attention in a systematic way. I kept a notes app on my phone, a plain text file, nothing fancy, where I started logging dates and observations. Date, time, what I noticed. It sounds clinical. It was. But it kept me from reacting emotionally when what I needed was information. The GPS tracker I bought in early June. Same kind of research anyone does now: forums, Reddit threads, review sites. I went with a bouncy GPS, smaller than a deck of cards, plugged into the OBD2 port under the dashboard of her Mazda CX-5. That port is under the steering column, most people don't know it exists. Took me 45 seconds to install. The bouncy sent me location updates every minute and I could pull up the full trip history from an app. What I found in the first 2 weeks. Sandra was driving to a condo complex in Munster 3 to 4 times per week. Always between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. Always logging it as working late or not logging it at all. The complex was called Harborview Newer Construction, the kind of place where young professionals rent when they want something clean and modern and don't mind paying for it. I drove past it once, slowly, on a Saturday morning when Sandra was at a yoga class. Nice place. Covered parking. Security cameras at the entrance. I noted the address and kept driving. I also, in June, hired a private investigator. His name was Dennis Falco, mid-50s, retired Lake County Sheriff's detective, ran a one-man operation out of an office above a pizza place in Valparaiso. I'd found him through a referral on a legal forum. I met him for coffee, showed him the GPS data, gave him the Harborview address. He took the case for $800 and delivered results within 10 days. Dennis got photos. A man, mid-40s, distinguished looking, the kind of guy who wears a sport coat to a casual dinner. Name, Raymond Collier. 51 years old. Senior project manager at Kellerman & Associates. Sandra's direct superior for the past 6 years. Her boss. Dennis kept watching. And what he found over the next 6 weeks had nothing to do with the affair. Dennis Falco was good at his job because he was patient and because he thought like an investigator, not like a photographer trying to get a money shot. He didn't just document Sandra and Raymond together. He watched their patterns. And their patterns were strange. The late-night visits to the Harborview condo, which Dennis confirmed was Raymond's personal residence, rented in his name alone, sometimes included a third element. A car Dennis didn't recognize. A black Chevy Tahoe, always parked at the far end of the lot. Different plates each time. Dennis ran 2 of them, both registered to LLCs with addresses in Illinois that didn't resolve to actual businesses. He photographed envelopes. Sandra leaving Raymond's building with a manila envelope twice in a 3-week period. He photographed her stopping at a UPS store on US 30 both times, going in with the envelope, coming out without it. He traced the UPS store visits through a contact he had. The envelopes were being shipped to a company called Tri-State Infrastructure Solutions, LLC. An address in Schaumburg, Illinois. Dennis handed me his full report on a Tuesday afternoon, sitting at that same coffee shop in Valparaiso. 31 pages. Photos, timestamps, vehicle logs, the LLC information. I read it that night after Tyler was asleep. Then I picked up the phone and called my attorney, a woman named Patricia Hum who specialized in divorce and family law but had strong connections in the local legal community. I'd already consulted her twice since April. Patricia read the report the next morning and called me back at noon. Her exact words: "Ray, this isn't just a divorce situation. You need to talk to someone at the county level. Today." That's how I ended up in a conference room with Detective Garza. Detective Garza worked financial crimes for Lake County. He was methodical, spoke slowly, asked questions that seemed simple but weren't. When I laid out Dennis's report, my GPS logs, and the information about Tri-State Infrastructure Solutions, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Kellerman and Associates does municipal contracts?" "Yes," I said. "Roads, drainage, public works." He wrote something down. "Give me 2 weeks." What the investigation found, and what I would learn in pieces over the following months, was this. Raymond Collier had been running a bid manipulation scheme through Kellerman and Associates for approximately 3 years. Tri-State Infrastructure Solutions was a shell company he'd created. When Kellerman won municipal contracts, certain subcontracting work was routed to Tri-State at inflated prices. The difference, the markup, was kicked back. Hundreds of thousands of dollars over 3 years, moving through a layered series of accounts. Sandra had been his inside person for at least 18 months. As operations director, she controlled vendor payment approvals. She'd been approving every Tri-State invoice without routing them through the standard compliance review. She hadn't created the scheme. But she'd been running the mechanism that made it work, and she'd been paid for it. The account Dennis had flagged through the UPS store shipments eventually traced to a joint account Sandra and Raymond held at a credit union in Illinois under slightly altered versions of their middle names. There was $67,000 in it. Detective Garza's team got a warrant. I knew it was coming. I knew roughly when. And Patricia had made sure that by the time it happened, my financial situation, our finances, the house, the accounts, was documented and protected. The last piece of the surveillance picture came from an unexpected direction. The local NBC affiliate in Chicago had been running their own investigation into municipal contract fraud in the south suburbs of Illinois and northwest Indiana. They'd gotten a tip, I don't know from where, possibly the same financial crimes unit Garza worked in, and they'd been building a story for months. The story was about Kellerman and Associates, Raymond Collier, and a pattern of contracts involving Tri-State Infrastructure Solutions. They aired it on a Wednesday morning at 10:15 a.m. Tyler's 5th grade teacher, doing a current events segment, pulled it up on the classroom smartboard. I drove to Marcus Elementary in 28 minutes. I'd called the front office from the highway and they had Tyler waiting for me in the counselor's room when I arrived, a small, quiet space with a fish tank and a bowl of wrapped candies on the table. He was sitting in a chair with his backpack in his lap, still in his coat. His eyes were red but he'd stopped crying. I sat down across from him and I didn't say anything right away. I just looked at my kid. "Dad," he said. "Was it really her?" "I don't know everything yet," I said. Which was technically true and also the most honest thing I could give him in that room. The school counselor, a kind woman named Mrs. Petrakis, stepped out to give us privacy. I moved my chair next to Tyler's and put my arm around him and he leaned into me the way he hadn't done since he was about 7, and I sat there with my son in that small quiet room with the fish tank humming and I thought, she did this. Whatever else happens, she brought this into the school. Into this room. Onto my kid. I took Tyler home. I called Sandra, her main phone, the iPhone, and it went to voicemail. I texted, "Call me now." 30 minutes later she called. I could hear in her voice that she already knew. Something tight and careful in it. "I need you to come home," I said. "Ray, I can explain." I'm not asking you to explain anything on the phone. Come home. She came home at 2 p.m. Tyler was in his room with the door closed. I told him to put on headphones and watch something, that his mom and I needed to talk. Sandra walked in through the garage door and she looked like she hadn't slept, even though it was the middle of the afternoon. She set her bag down on the kitchen counter. I was sitting at the kitchen table. I had my phone on the table, face up, recording. I had Dennis Falco's report in a folder to my left. I had a printed copy of the bouncy GPS trip history to my right. She sat down. How long? I said. Ray. How long, Sandra? She looked at the folder. She looked at the GPS printout. And something in her face shifted, not guilt exactly, more like calculation. Like she was running numbers on what I knew versus what I didn't. The relationship, she said carefully, started about 2 years ago. And Tri-State? The calculation in her face stopped. Just stopped. Like a screen going blank. How do you know about Tri-State? She said. It wasn't a question. Detective Garza, Lake County Financial Crimes, I said. I've been meeting with him since July. She put both hands flat on the table. I want you to understand something, I said. This conversation is being recorded. Patricia Hom is my attorney. She has copies of everything in these folders plus Dennis Falco's full investigative report. Whatever you say right now, say it knowing that. She was quiet for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. Upstairs, faintly, I could hear the sound of Tyler's TV. I didn't create it, she said finally. It was Raymond's idea. I just. You approved the invoices. Yes. For 18 months. She didn't answer. $67,000 in an account in Illinois. Her jaw tightened. Half of that is mine anyway under. Stop. I held up my hand. Stop talking. I'm serious. Don't say anything else without your own attorney present because everything you're saying is going to matter. She stopped. 3 days later, at 7 a.m. on a Thursday morning, 2 Lake County Sheriff's deputies and Detective Garza knocked on the front door of Raymond Collier's office at Kellerman and Associates. They executed arrest warrants for Raymond Collier and Sandra simultaneously. She was taken from the Kellerman parking lot as she arrived for work. Tyler was at school. I made sure of that. The investigation, once it fully opened, turned out to be bigger than anyone had told me to expect. Tri-State Infrastructure Solutions had been used on 11 separate municipal contracts across 3 counties over 31 months. The inflated subcontracting charges totaled, when the forensic accountants finished counting, just over $890,000. Sandra's personal take, her share of what moved through the Illinois Credit Union account, was $67,000. But the prosecutors found a second account. A savings account at a different institution, opened in her maiden name, that she apparently believed was effectively invisible. It had $31,000 in it. She had been systematically moving money out of our joint accounts and into these separate accounts for over a year. Patricia had flagged the pattern in our financial records before any of this went public, which is why, when the divorce proceedings began, we had documentation of exactly when the money had moved and where it had gone. The municipal contracts angle brought in a second agency. The Indiana State Board of Accounts got involved because several of the inflated contracts were funded with state infrastructure dollars. What had started as a local financial crimes case became a multi-agency investigation. Raymond Collier, I learned through the proceedings, had done something similar at a previous firm in Michigan 8 years earlier. He'd never been prosecuted. The previous firm had quietly terminated him and declined to press charges to avoid the publicity. He'd carried the playbook to Kellerman and found, in Sandra, someone who needed the money less than she needed the thrill of having a secret. That was the part one couldn't entirely explain, even after everything. We weren't struggling financially. My business was doing well. We had equity in the house. There was no desperation in our situation that I could point to and say, that's why. She'd done it because Raymond had asked her to. Because she wanted the money. Because she wanted him. Because she'd made a decision and kept making it for 18 months and convinced herself, probably, that it would never come apart. It came apart on a classroom smartboard in front of 22 fifth graders. Sandra was terminated from Kellerman and Associates the morning of her arrest. That was automatic. The firm's attorneys moved immediately to distance the company from her and Raymond both, though how much the partners had genuinely known was something the investigation was still sorting through. Her professional certifications, she held credentials in operations management and compliance, were suspended pending the criminal proceedings. Given that her charges included contract fraud and conspiracy, reinstatement was unlikely. The house was in both our names. As part of the divorce settlement, it went to me along with primary custody of Tyler. Sandra's attorney fought on several points, but the hidden accounts, the maiden name account especially, destroyed her credibility in the financial negotiations. When you've been secretly moving money while your husband paid the mortgage, you don't have a strong position on asset division. She moved into an apartment in Hammond. I don't know many details. Tyler visited her on alternating weekends per the custody arrangement, supervised initially. He didn't talk much about those visits when he came home, and I didn't push. What I watched over the following months was the quiet collapse of a social world she'd spent years building. The couples we'd known, the people from Tyler's school, the neighbors, the friends from the firm, they didn't make dramatic announcements. They just gradually stopped including her. Invitations didn't come. The group texts went quiet when she responded. The book club she'd been part of for 4 years dissolved and reconstituted without her. I'm not saying this with any satisfaction. I'm saying it because it happened and it's part of the story. The hardest thing I dealt with, harder than any of the legal proceedings or the financial untangling, was Tyler. He was 11 when the news segment aired. Old enough to understand that something serious had happened. Not old enough to process what it meant about the person who was his mother. He had nightmares for about 6 weeks. He started seeing a therapist named Dr. Walsh, who was good with kids and who Tyler actually seemed to like. One Saturday morning in December, Tyler and I were making pancakes, a weekly ritual we did since he was small. His job was the chocolate chips, and he said, out of nowhere, "Dad, did you know for a long time?" I flipped a pancake. I suspected something. I wasn't sure what. Why didn't you say something to her? Because I needed to understand what I was dealing with before I said anything. Does that make sense? He thought about it. Like in soccer, he said. You watch which way the defender moves before you go for the ball. Exactly like that, I said. He added the chocolate chips with great seriousness. I stood at the stove and thought, this kid is going to be okay. The criminal case resolved in the spring. Sandra pled guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud and 1 count of theft. The plea agreement included full cooperation with the ongoing investigation into Raymond Collier and the broader tri-state scheme. In exchange, the prosecutors recommended a sentence of 3 years of supervised probation, restitution of the full $98,000 from both accounts, and 300 hours of community service. No prison time. Her attorney had worked hard for that, and the cooperation credit mattered. Raymond Collier did not get the same outcome. He went to trial, which I think was a mistake his attorney talked him into, and the jury took 4 hours to convict on 7 of 9 counts. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal custody. The state infrastructure funding angle had brought in federal jurisdiction and ordered to pay $890,000 in restitution. I followed the Raymond Collier verdict on the Lake County Court website from my truck in a parking lot in Merrillville. I was between jobs, had 20 minutes before I needed to be at a commercial job in Griffith. I read the verdict, sat with it for a minute, then put the truck in drive. The divorce was finalized in April. I got the house, primary custody, and a clean financial separation. The $98,000 she'd hidden went toward restitution, not toward me. That money belonged to the municipalities and ultimately the taxpayers. That was fine. I didn't want it. What I wanted was simpler than money. It's October now. Tyler made the travel soccer team, the competitive one, the one with the good coach and the early Saturday practices and the tournaments in South Bend. He's the fastest kid on the field and he knows it, but he doesn't act like it, which tells you something about who he's becoming. I'm seeing someone. I'm not going to say much about that except that she's a 4th grade teacher from Valparaiso named Gail, and she laughs at the same things I laugh at, and she came to one of Tyler's soccer games last month and he showed off the entire time and then pretended he hadn't. My crew is busy. Good winter contracts, school district heating upgrades. I've got 3 guys I've worked with for 7 years who show up every morning and do good work, and at the end of a job you can see what you built or fixed, and that means something. Dennis Falco, the PI, sent me a Christmas card last year. A real one, in an envelope, with a stamp. It said, "Good outcome." Rare, but it happens. D. I put it on the refrigerator. It's still there.